Gebser was a philosopher, a linguist, and a poet, who described the structures of human consciousness. Biography: born Hans Gebser in Posen in Imperial Germany, he left Germany in 1929, living for a time in Italy and then in France. He then moved to Spain, mastered the Spanish language in a few months and entered the Spanish civil service, where he rose to become a senior official in the Spanish Ministry of Education. When the Spanish Civil War began, he moved to Paris. He lived in Paris for a while but saw the unavoidability of German invasion. He fled to Switzerland in 1939, escaping only hours before the border was closed. He spent the rest of his life near Bern, where he did most of his writing. Late in life, Gebser traveled widely in India, the Far East, and the Americas, and wrote half a dozen more books. He was also a published poet. Gebser died in Weyburn Bay, Bern on May 14, 1973, with a soft and knowing smile. His personal letters and publications are held at the Gebser Archives at the University of Oklahoma History of Science Collections, Norman, Oklahoma, Bizzle Libraries. Consciousness in Transition. Gebser's major thesis was that human consciousness is in transition, and that these transitions are mutations, and not continuous. These jumps or transformations involve structural changes in both mind and body. Gebser held that previous consciousness structures continue to operate parallel to the emergent structure. Consciousness is presence, or being present. As Gebser understands the term, conscious is neither knowledge nor conscience but must be understood for the time being in the broadest sense as wakeful presence. Each consciousness structure eventually becomes deficient, and is replaced by a following structure. The stress and chaos in Europe from 1914 to 1945 were the symptoms of a structure of consciousness that was at the end of its effectiveness, and which heralded the birth of a new form of consciousness. The first evidence he witnessed was in the novel use of language and literature. He modified this position in 1943 so as to include the changes which were occurring in the arts and sciences at that time. His thesis of the failure of one structure of consciousness alongside the emergence of a new one led him to inquire as to whether such had not occurred before. His work, Ursprung is the result of that inquiry. It was published in various editions from 1949 to 1953, and translated into English as The Ever-Present Origin. Working from the historical evidence of almost every major field, Gebser saw traces of the emergence and collapse of various structures of consciousness throughout history. The structures of consciousness. Gebser distinguished the following structures: the archaic structure, the magic structure, the mythical structure, the mental structure, the integral structure, the archaic structure. The archaic structure is the first structure of consciousness to emerge from the ever-present origin. The term archaic as used here is derived from the Greek arch, meaning inception, or origin. Origin is the source from which all springs, but it is that which springs forth itself. It is the essence which is behind and which underlies consciousness. No direct information on this structure is available. It is inferred from writings from later times. It is zero-dimensional. Consciousness is only a dimly lit mist devoid of shadows. It is not individual, but was totally identical with the whole. The human being was totally immersed in the world, unable to extricate himself or herself from that world. They were identical with that world. The magic structure. In the magical structure, events, objects and persons are magically related. Symbols and statues do not just represent those events, objects and persons, but are those same objects and persons. The mythical structure. In the mythical structure, events, objects and persons are woven together in stories. Mythologies give coherence to consciousness. The mental structure. The mental structure appropriates events, objects and persons by the use of logic. The deficient form of the mental structure Gebser called the rational structure. The rational structure of awareness seeks to deny the other structures with its claim that humans are exclusively rational. The rational structure is known for its extremes as evidenced in various nothing but statements. Extreme materialism claims that everything is nothing but matter atoms. Philosophy, the love of wisdom, is replaced with instrumental reason, the ability to make. Contemplation looking inward is devalued in relation to what one can do. wise men fall out of favor and are replaced by the man of action. Successes in technologically reshaping matter offer solutions to some problems but also give rise to problems of their own making. Mechanized slaughter of 2 world wars and the new atomic weapons exemplified and symbolized the expression of the ontology of the rational mental structure. Living becomes hard to bear in such a consciousness structure. Some saw the cause of this despair as a lack of values or ethics. Gebser saw that it is the very consciousness structure itself which has played out to its inherent end. He saw that its metaphysical presumptions necessarily led to this ethical dead end. A value-free ontology like materialism leads of necessity to living without value. Any attempt to remedy the situation by a return to values would ultimately fail. But it was through this very quagmire of the decline of the West that Gebser saw the emergence of a new structure of consciousness which he termed the integral. The integral structure, the integral consciousness structure was made evident by a new relationship to space and time. In the second part of his work, Gebser set out to document the evidence that he saw throughout various human endeavors. Of note here were the incorporation of time in physics, the attempts to paint time in the visual arts and the like. Gebser noticed that the integral structure of consciousness was largely witnessed as the eruption of time into the fixed reality of the mental structure. For Gebser, dualistically opposed and static categories of being gave way to transparency. Transparency points to how it is that the one is given through, and always along with the other. For centuries, time was viewed as having distinct categories of past, present and future. These categories were said to be wholly distinct one from the other. Of course, this created all kinds of difficulties regarding how beings moved from one category to the other from present to past, for example. What integral awareness notices is that though we may utilize categorical thinking for various purposes, we also have the realization that time is an indivisible whole. That various beings in the present are crystallized from the past, and which also extend into the future. In fact, without already having an integral awareness, one could have no notion of time as past, or present, etc. Without the awareness of the whole, one would be stuck in a kind of not knowing of an always only now not connected to any sense of past or future. Even the mental awareness which divides this whole into distinct categories could not have become aware of those categories without an awareness which was already integral. Thus, awareness is already integral. Gebser introduced the notion of presentiation, which means to make something present through transparency. An aspect of integral awareness is the presentiation, or making present, of the various structures of awareness. Rather than allowing only one structure to be valid, all structures are recognized, presented, one through the other. This awareness of and acceptance of the various structures enables one to live through the various structures rather than to be subjected to them. To realize the various structures within one's language and habits, and even within one's own life and self is a difficult task. But Gebser says that it is a task that we cannot choose to ignore without losing ourselves. This means that our so-called objective thinking is not without consequences, is not innocent. That to live objectively means to give life to the horrors of nihilism combined with a know-how of highly efficient weapons. It means that objectivity gets applied to engineering humanity, whether it is in the behavioral sciences or the physical sciences. He asks of us whether or not we have had our fill of those horrors yet. Are we willing to settle into the comfort of our daily life or to take on the process of change? He offers as a guiding note that just as there is also a time to act, there is also the much neglected time of contemplation. In a world where know-how is overvalued, simple knowing must also be nurtured. Furthermore, he knew that thought was never simply a mental exercise restricted to one's writing. He calls upon us to realize that we are what we think. Terminology, discontinuity. Gebser cautioned against using terms like evolution, progression, or development to describe the changes in structures of consciousness that he described. Gebser traces the evidence for the transformations of the structure of consciousness as they are concretized in historical artifacts. He sought to avoid calling this process evolutionary, since any such notion was illusory when applied to the unfolding of consciousness. Gebser emphasized that biological evolution is an enclosing process which particularizes a species to a limited environment. The unfolding of awareness is, by contrast, an opening up. Any attempt to give a direction or goal to the unfolding of awareness is illusory in that it is based upon a limited, mentalistic, linear notion of time. Gebser notes that to progress is to move towards something and is thus also to move away from something else. Therefore, progress is an inappropriate term to describe the structures of consciousness. Gebser wrote that the question as to the fate of humanity is still open, that for it to become closed would be the ultimate tragedy, but that such a closure remains a possibility. To Gebser, our fate is not assured by any notion of an evolution toward any kind of ideal way of being. Space and time. Gebser notes that the various structures of consciousness are revealed by their relationship to space and time. For example, the mythical structure embodies time as cyclical, rhythmic, and space is enclosed. The mental structure lives time as linear, directed or progressive, and space becomes the box-like, vacuum-like homogeneous space of geometry. Influence. Gebser's work has formed the basis of a number of other studies and writers. Ken Wilber referred to and quoted Gebser in his 1981 Up from Eden and subsequent works. Wilber found Gebser's pioneering work to align to his own model of consciousness, although Wilber finds evidence for additional later mystical stages beyond Gebser's integral structure. William Thompson, in his 1996 Coming into Being, William Owen Thompson compared Gebser's structures of consciousness to Marshall McLuhan's conception of the development of communication technology from oral culture to script culture, alphabetic culture, print culture, and then to the emerging electronic culture. Thompson applied these insights to education theory in his 2001 Transforming History, a curriculum for cultural evolution. In his 2004 Self and Society, Studies in the Evolution of Consciousness, and in collaboration with the mathematician Ralph Abraham, Thompson further related Gebser's structures to periods in the development of mathematics and in the history of music. New Age. Gebser's integral philosophy is evaluated and applied to New Age thinking about a nascent shift in consciousness in the 2006 book 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl by Daniel Pinchbeck. In A Secret History of Consciousness, cultural historian Gary Lachman links Gebser's work to that of other alternative philosophers of consciousness, such as Owen Barfield, Rudolf Steiner, Colin Wilson, and George Moskvitin. Other influences. Gebser's influence is also present in Rudolf Barrows' Logique der Rettung, Hugo Emile Lassalle's Living in the New Consciousness, Daniel Kelly's Revisioning Environmental Ethics, Georg Feuerstein's Wholeness or Transcendence, Eric Mark Kramer's Modern Postmodern, Off the Beaten Path of Antimodernism. Bibliography, English, The Ever-Present Origin, authorized translation by Noel Barstad with Algis McCunas, Anxiety, A Condition of Modern Man, by Yuri Steiner and Jean Gebser, German, Rekunstspanion, 1936–1939, Der Grammatische Spiegel, 1944, Ian Bruch der Zeit, 1995, see also, Perspective, Integral Thought, Spiral Dynamics, Fowler's Stages of Faith Development, Notes. References. Web references. Sources. Further reading, English, Georg Feuerstein, Structures of Consciousness, The Genius of Jean Gebser, An Introduction and Critique, Georg Feuerstein, Jean Gebser, What Color is Your Consciousness, Eric Mark Kramer Consciousness and Culture, An Introduction to the Thought of Jean Gebser, German, Joachim Ellis, Adolf Portmann, Jean Gebser, Johann Jacob Bachofen, Drei Kulturfischer, Drei Bilder vom Menschen, Ursula Aussing-Grosch, Das Schwierigkeit, Jean Gebser's Bewusstseins für Currency-Nomenology and der Kinder- und Jugendpsychiatrischen Praxis, Elmische 1/4 BL, Jean Gebser, External links, The Jean Gebser Society, Gebser Online, An Overview of the Work of Jean Gebser, Alan Coombs, Inner and Outer Realities, Jean Gebser in a Cultural Historical Perspective, Stephen Swanson, The Integral and the Spiritual in Ken Wilber and Jean Gebser. The Journal of Yoga, September 2002, Aaron Cheek, From Poetry to Culture Philosophy, A Philosophical Biography of Jean Gebser with Critical Translations.